Hello. In this module, we're going to look at social entrepreneurship. That is entrepreneurship which aims to deliver a social benefit, a social mission. So, what is it? A few definitions here. This one comes from Ashoka, which is a worldwide social entrepreneurship organization. Social entrepreneurs are individuals with innovative solutions to society's most pressing social problems. Another one from academic researchers, that it emphasizes activities and processes, deep down, to enhance social wealth. That's the main distinctive factor there. Adapting the Howard Stevenson definition that we've become used to, social entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity with a mission to improve social outcomes, without regard to resources currently controlled. In the textbook, there's a chapter on social entrepreneurship, and it's defined there as creating or applying economically viable models to achieve social or environmental purposes. So you'll notice it groups environmental entrepreneurship in with social. And you'll also notice it says economically viable. Now, there tends to be a perception that social entrepreneurship is not about making money. That's not the purpose of the business, but no venture can survive if it isn't bringing enough revenue to cover the cost of its operations. That's what's meant by economically viable. So some of the key points from that chapter. Social entrepreneurs are change agents. So they create and sustain social value, not just private value. In other words, they contribute to making society better for people other than just those who can pay for it. They find new opportunities to serve the social mission. So they're creative, they're innovative, just like regular entrepreneurs. They are engaging in continuous innovation, adaptation, learning. In other words, they are constantly problem solving, finding new opportunities. They act boldly without being limited by resources, just like regular entrepreneurs, but they have a higher accountability. They have more stakeholders, to put it another way, in their venture than a traditional for-profit entrepreneur, which is simply providing a product or a service in exchange for money from the customers who will benefit from that product or service. One important distinction with social enterprises is quite often the people who benefit from the social enterprise are not actually paying for its products and services. Okay, what sort of social problems can they address? Well, environment is one of them. A degraded environment reduces the social experience of people, reducing poverty, human rights, equality, health, and all sorts of community problems such as homelessness, disability, local environment and heritage, indigenous disadvantaged refugees, etc., etc. Notice environment. Environmental entrepreneurship is a form of social entrepreneurship in that looking after our natural environment, our ecological environment, is a collective benefit and it benefits society. This is a really interesting chart that shows the spectrum of social entrepreneurship between, on the one hand, the traditional charity, which is simply, it has no business basis to it, it makes no profits, to a traditional business which is only focused on making profits. And let's look at these sections in more detail. So at the charity end, the primary driver is to achieve social value. Now, it may be a purely charitable funding organisation, so it gets funding from grants and donations or endowments. For example, Médecins Sans Frontières, which delivers medical services to areas in need, usually in the developing world, it operates on donations and volunteers. There are no products as such. Oxfam, which operates trade aid shops, has donations and volunteers, but it also makes money from the products sold in the shops. The business end, you've got your pure profit orientation mainstream investors, but you've also got businesses which are concerned about their reputation as contributing to society. So many established businesses, particularly professional services, resource companies, banking, when reputation is important to them, they like to be seen to be carrying out corporate socially responsible activities. These might be matched donations, so if the employee donates a certain amount to a charity, the company will donate the same amount. They will give people time off to volunteer with organisations. They may have philanthropic foundations, in other words, they donate to charity through a foundation. Most mainstream businesses, however, the focus is simply on business profitability, and social impact is not seen as the concern of the business. Now that's starting to change, partly because society and employees are demanding that businesses consider their impact on society, but it does remain a fact that a lot of businesses, it is not a concern or only a very minor one. And in the middle, you've got this idea of the social enterprise, which are, if you like, a hybrid between the traditional charity and the traditional business. They invest in social impact, so they are not necessarily not-for-profit. They may be aiming to make a profit, they may have shareholders that they will return dividends to, but they do that by providing products and services that enhance society. There's even a business structure for this, a mission-driven for-profit enterprise known as a B Corp. Those have recently become available in Australia. Examples of these would be something Grameen Bank, which operates in microfinance, which is very small loans to people who don't have any assets. That's a for-profit business. The Big Issue magazines, which is an international one, and I've got a few more examples of that later. Lentil as Anything is a cooperative where you have a meal and you pay what you think it's worth, and people who can't afford to pay can eat for free. Street is a cafe chain, cafe and catering, which trains people who've been long-term unemployed. Thank You Water, we've heard about before. I'm going to talk about Who Gives a Crap later on. Tom's One for One, Tom's Shoes, basically you buy a pair of shoes and a pair of shoes is donated to somebody in a developing country where they can't perhaps afford shoes. So basically these are generating profits potentially, although they may be reinvesting them in the business or they may be distributing them to shareholders, but they're doing it through delivering a socially valuable product or service. Let's have a closer look at Grameen Bank. Grameen Bank was founded by Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, and it was in recognition that poor people could not break out of poverty because they lived day to day and they could never get enough money to invest in something that would allow them to earn income. So, for example, they would always have to go and buy milk from someone else rather than having their own goat or cow to milk for themselves. So what he came up with was the idea of making very small loans to people and which would allow them to break out of the poverty cycle. And surprisingly or surprisingly not, he found that the poor were very good at paying back loans. The Big Issue. If you've been around the streets of Melbourne, you may have seen vendors selling the Big Issue. In fact, we have an alliance at Swinburne with the Big Issue. They contribute a project for the Capstone 2 Industry Consulting Project in the Bachelor of Business program. So Big Issue is an entrepreneurial venture which has been going for quite a long time. It's been 20 years in Australia. Sorry, it's been in Australia since 1996. And it's very widespread. It's been very successful. What happens is that the vendors buy the magazines, so they are, if you like, each self-employed. They buy the magazines for 50% of the price that they sell them for, and it allows them to make money which they can then use to put a deposit on rental and break out of the poverty cycle. Here's a local example, Street. Stop homelessness the delicious way. So homeless people, again, find it hard to break out of that cycle. So Street runs cafes, and it trains people who are homeless to with cafe skills and employs them until they're skilled enough to go and get a job themselves. It also serves delicious food and great coffee. Now here's a bit of a jokey title, but it's been very successful. Who Gives a Crap? This is actually co-founded by an Australian, but it involves, I think, the US, possibly UK as well. So this is simply saying that toilet paper, if it's made from pure wood chip, is very bad for the environment. But if it can be made from recycled paper, and that saves trees. And in return, just like thank you water, they provide benefit to developing countries. So 50% of profits used to build toilets and improve sanitation. And you've got to check out their crowdfunding video. It's brilliant. Here's another local example, and even more local because this one was started by 2 Swinburne students in the Master of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, or postgraduate program. Living Fundraisers was set up to provide schools, kindergartens, all those sorts of organisations with a way of raising funding without selling chocolate, which is not good for our health. What they provided instead is starting off with seed growing kits, flowers, vegetables, fruits, herbs, etc. Now that's seasonal, so it's limited, so they expanded into greeting cards, sustainably made, healthy snacks, and their most recent initiative is the closet clean out, where it's a bit like the charity shop bins, but they've got a really innovative model for collecting it and distributing it, and a clear demonstration of where it goes to. So the other thing that's interesting about Living Fundraisers is that they have remained ethical throughout their whole supply chain. So as well as selling environmentally and socially beneficial products, they also have them manufactured by workshops based here in Melbourne, which are staffed by workers who've got a disability. So they're providing employment to those workers as well as providing socially useful products to parents and to schools. So really, really innovative business. Some of the differences between a social business and a traditional for-profit business, and bear in mind that some social businesses, quite a lot of them, are also for profit. So the legal structure, a social business may be a not-for-profit, but it could be a commercial entity. A traditional for-profit is a commercial entity. If it's a for-profit business, then the owners have equity in it. They own the business. With social business, that may be the case, but often it isn't. It may be a cooperative or a not-for-profit, which means that not-for-profits doesn't mean you can't make a profit, but it means that those profits are reinvested in the business. The main motive for a social business is to create social wealth. The main motive for a profit business is to create monetary wealth. The bottom line is social outcomes, so that would be one of the key performance indicators for profit businesses: profit, dividends, sales, market share, etc. There are limitations on the capital raising. For a for-profit business, it's usually a loan from the bank, debt or equity. That's somebody buying a share in the business. Whereas social businesses, they can still get debt, but unless they've got shareholders, they won't get equity. There are some investors who will actually buy a share of a social business, but they won't necessarily do it for profit. They are eligible for a lot of government grants and also donations from supporters. And the main stakeholders, unlike for-profit companies where they're shareholders, are the users of the service, the impact recipients, and the people who fund that service. But there are also a lot of similarities. So both types of organisations focus on a problem or opportunity. They both manage scarce resources, at least at the start, and in the case of social enterprises, often ongoing. They apply entrepreneurial principles. The same process applies to a social enterprise startup as a for-profit lean startup. In fact, the history of living fundraisers is absolutely a lean startup approach. They seek fast growth to solve a problem, and we may not think of social enterprises as being fast growing, but many of them are. If you think of the international aid organisations, they all started small and they're now internationally distributed. But they may have different motivations for growth. It may be about extending the impact, the social benefit as widely as possible, rather than raising the maximum profit to distribute to shareholders or to sell the business to another company. It creates value, both create value, but the social business must create social value. And they both need high creativity and resilience from the entrepreneurs and founding team to succeed. Who should solve social problems? This is something that we perhaps don't think about that often, but perhaps there are opportunities there for an entrepreneurial person. Should government solve them using our taxes? Well, they certainly should, because that's why we pay them taxes. But there are perhaps limitations to what they can do, and they're often slow to react. Should big companies solve them using some of their profits? Again, it's hard to persuade them to do that, although most of them are now conscious of not causing social harm. Small business. Often small businesses are focused on survival. The not-for-profit sector, taxes, donations, etc. The not-for-profit sector often does use our taxes because they don't have to pay tax if they're a registered charity. Or what about us? Everyone? No one? Is it all too hard? Well, here's a way that everybody can contribute. Your dollar is your vote. Everything you buy, everything you consume, is reflecting your perspective on a social problem. So, who did you vote for today? I think it's a great slogan. I got it from an organisation called Shop Ethical, and the founder of that organisation said he saw it on a t-shirt at a social rally and thought it was a really great idea. But it's a good way of thinking about how your behaviour actually contributes or helps to alleviate social problems. So, hey, maybe you should think about changing your brand of toilet paper, or suggesting to your local primary school that they try a different sort of fundraising drive. Takeaways from today. Social entrepreneurship aims to help solve social problems. All entrepreneurship is aimed at solving a problem or meeting a need. Social entrepreneurship is always going to be full of opportunities because there are always social problems that need to be solved. It's very similar to traditional, quote, business entrepreneurship, but the main difference is that it's about the purpose of the business, and it's not necessarily about its structure. It may be a charity or a not-for-profit, but not necessarily. And here's an interesting thought. It often meets a psychological need on the part of the people who provide the revenue to keep the organisation sustainable. We like to help others. We like to be good people. And that's a benefit that social entrepreneurs and social enterprises have over traditional business that perhaps is often overlooked. So I'll leave you with that parting thought.